everybody. Welcome to ADD Masterminds. I'm Bridge Live Watt. I'm Bridge Live Watt.
Speaks in other
I
tongues.
can't even say my made-up name
Jesus.
clearly.
Sorry, I make you
I'm
nervous.
Bridge, and I'm here with Jimmy the Talking Table.
Yeah.
And the girl.
Hey, boys.
Hey, boys. I love that.
Hi.
I should do like a higher pitched little, really feminine voice.
Should I that be my character for today?
Yeah.
Your character.
Hi.
We're doing characters now?
We
It's been a
should.
while.
Let's see if I can stay in character for the entire show.
You sound really
Bridge with the
you sound really
rejected
tough.
Muppets.
Well, everybody's turning into cartoon characters on Twitter.
I saw
So,
that.
I mean, it makes sense to do cartoony voices.
Why not? Sure, let's go with it.
Oh, Jimmy, you did do a cartoon character picture of yourself, too.
I finally gave in to the pressures of society.
It's killing me. Okay.
My wife did, and so I was just like, okay, since she gave in to the Russian hacking trolls who are going to steal our identity, since they already have pictures of me, so I might as well just join the club.
It's like you're under like one of those people who get their voice modified, to be
Protecting his identity.
pretending. Yeah, exactly.
All
right, so everybody's turned into cartoons, and Jeff Bezos is going to space.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping he wouldn't come back.
Why what do you have against Bezos?
He's just like he looks more reptilian overlord than any of the reptilian overlords.
Is it because of the funny thing of his eye?
Oh, it is really tough. I can barely understand you.
Okay, I'm going to switch back to normal voice. Sorry.
Yeah, Elon Musk. Okay, hold on. Definitive ranking. I think you're right. Number one would be Elon Musk. He looks the most reptilian overlord. Jeff Bezos is second.
Is it because of the Popeye that he kind of has?
That's kind of interesting too. Like, you got lots of money. You think you could fix that? I know, like with Forrest Whitaker,
right?
Like Forrest Whitaker is a guy that's got an eye thing going on, but I think he's deliberately kept it because he's like, no, it's part of my character.
Yeah,
which is cool.
No longer, when you see him in a movie, no longer you're like, hey, it's that black guy. You're like, hey, it's the guy with the eye.
That's one of the things I love about TikTok is there's like a lot of people with disabilities or even like facial, abnormalities, if that's the right word to use. Like this lady who has like a scar on her face. She's got like she's got a birthmark on half of her face. But she like did her hair really funky, and it looks awesome. It's like people are rocking whatever they got, and I think that's really cool.
Oh, that is cool.
And the other great thing about TikTok is it's another way for foreign governments to spy on us.
Like China.
Yep.
Yeah. See how I avoided saying China? And then
I'm sorry. We don't do politics.
Yeah, so Jeff Bezos is going back to his home planet.
I saw somebody talking about like, why doesn't he just how do we know he's not going to go crazy and just float into the sun?
I mean, he let someone else take over as CEO, didn't he? So
yeah, that's crazy.
Amazon will still be fine.
Stay there now.
Well,
yeah, he's like basically like a figurehead at this point. He's like the queen of Amazon.
He's like the chairman of the board or something, but he's not going to be involved in the day-to-day running of the company. He's going to just pretty much show up and say, I vote we do this, and then go float around in space. I hope they sell tickets on Prime.
Do you have any interest in going to space?
I think it would be kind of neat just to prove all the flat earthers wrong. But I don't know. I'd probably have to lose weight and jog more and stuff before they blow me up into the hemisphere. So that's a negative, Ghost Rider.
I wouldn't make it past space camp. I get too motion sicknessy.
Yeah.
I will not make it.
I just get the feeling there's nothing there. And so I'm like, why am I
Hey.
flying up there for so long?
All the satellites they have in orbit, you get to see all those. That'd be kind of cool.
Those things are there. It's so final. Like if something goes wrong, you're out in space. It freaks me out. Like you're just so far. I don't know.
You
I go
ever
to
you ever like
doomsday.
ever ride a sea-doo?
I
No,
don't think
Like a
so.
jet ski or whatever?
No.
no.
Yeah, I remember we went to somebody's cabin and they had jet skis. And I went and rode on this jet ski for like about an hour, and then I'm like, it might have even been half an hour. And then I'm like, all right, I think I'm done.
So that's that, huh?
And it was just like, that was kind of fun for a little bit, but then it got boring. I'm like, there's nothing to do. Like,
I'm glad you didn't go spend like $10,000 on a new jet ski.
Like this is gonna be my thing now.
Right.
yeah.
Did you have somebody else? I feel like that you would have to like be on jet skis together to make it fun. You know, like race or
Right.
shout. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we were. I don't know. It just wasn't that exciting. Like, I think a jetpack would be more fun because you could see a lot of different cool crap, right? Because you're like, okay, I'm gonna go look at that cliff over there or whatever.
That's
And
true.
then the fact you're flying.
But I kind of feel like in space, like most of the trip, it's just like, oh look, it's black. You know? I don't
Maybe
know.
just one of those
I don't
little
think that's been
orbits.
I think that's been the exact reaction of 0 people who have been to space, though. They're all of them have been like, man, I need to do something really dramatic, like read in the beginning there was light, wait for the sun to rotate around the earth, or the earth to rotate around the sun. I'm sorry, and like do all sorts of dramatic stuff. It's never been just like, so this is space. Hi.
I feel like you got to have a lot of time on your hands to sit there and watch, like, stuff move.
I mean, it's not
Watch
like
the
you're
Earth
going
be the
anywhere
Earth.
else.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just convinced that going to space is dumb. But I might have gotten that from like listening to what's his name, Jesse Carey.
I was
talk
gonna
about
say
it.
he thinks space is boring.
Yeah,
Who's-
yeah. I think
who's
maybe he convinced me.
Who's
I think
he?
he's unrelevant.
The
Is he-
relevant podcast.
Has he been to space?
He went to
No.
space camp.
He
Oh.
did
I know
space
that.
camp. Yeah.
I know that.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
The
just
crazy
before
thing
this,
about
we were watching a
space
movie
is-
where space went totally wrong. So I'm staying here.
I'm pretty excited though about Sad Astronauts when that album comes out. It's Kevin Max's podcast.
Mm.
Or sorry, podcast. Album. His music album.
His music album, a
His
record.
music album. Yeah. Which will be all deconstructy and stuff, I think.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah. In space, no one can hear you cry as your religion falls apart. It's going to be great. Okay. So is the Southern Baptist Convention as corrupt as Twitter believes it really is? I was actually talking to a friend yesterday about a lot of the abuse that happens in the church. And he kind of said to me, well, don't believe everything Twitter says about the SBC. And I was like, well, I'm not really assessing, how much abuse is going on based on what Twitter says. But I do think that there's something going on there.
Sure.
And it's funny to me that like someone like Al Mohler is like, I want to be president and we're going to make sure we stick to the Bible or whatever he has to say. But he didn't say anything about the abuse.
No.
And it's like, that tells me that there are people that are aspiring to leadership that don't really want to deal with this.
Right.
Mm.
But the way the entire SBC is set up is like all the churches are independent of one another. So they don't really police behavior. They don't really police how you handle things. So, they don't have some sort of like judicial board or anything. You don't get brought up on charges if you screw up or anything. The only thing that can ever happen to your church is they decide you can't be, you can't wear the name on the door anymore. And that's pretty much it. Like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, like because they're an independent fellowship of churches. Like everybody sees the SBC and they think denomination is the biggest denomination in the United States or whatever. And then they imagine like it's the Episcopal Church or the Catholic Church or the Methodist Church.
Okay.
And they have no structure like that whatsoever. It's just a loose fellowship of churches that say, hey, we believe these things in common, these 16 points of doctrine. And for the sake of doing some larger cooperative works and sharing ministers helping churches find ministers should they need a church to find a minister. That's pretty much the extent of their involvement with one another. They're like, they have no like territorial bishops or anything like that, or cardinals or things like the Catholic Church has, who like all these people overseeing all these things. It's kind of like they do some missions work together. They print some Bibles. They maybe fund some seminaries, and they kind of put all their money in a collective pot and then kind of try to, do some things collectively. But they don't have like these sharp, rigid structures. So it's kind of like their theological polity almost prohibits them from getting too involved in the abuse scandals of other churches, just simply because it's kind of like, hey, that's not how we govern ourselves. And so they kind of leave it up to the individual churches to figure out the individual church's own mess.
I definitely didn't realize that. I thought there was more oversight hierarchy.
No.
Okay, but am I right though that SBC stands for Sexy Baptist Convention?
I wish. I don't know.
Sorry, guys. What you're doing is not sexy anymore. So you're out of the convention.
When I came to know the Lord and get water baptized, I joined a Southern Baptist church. I thought the preacher's daughter was pretty cute. So, and this was when I was 17, just for the record.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't like when I was like 28.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough issue, and it's coming out about the church. And it plays into a lot of, talking about gender roles. And there's just like the SBC, when people are conversing about the SBC, they're talking about gender roles and they're talking about abuse. And the more I think about it, the more I see that those are all interrelated. And it's like when you put people in power over other people, all kinds of messes happen. And so it's tough. And I'm still kind of on this Jesus and John Wayne kick. So I'm like, yeah, this is messed up. And so I think it is messed up. But is it a mass conspiracy? Well, if these churches aren't really linked in the way people seem to be saying they are, then it can't really be a systemic issue with the SBC, but it could be a theological issue that's causing it.
Right. Right.
So
it's just a church issue, like in general, then,
which
might be scarier.
I think it would be good though that if, even though it's just a loose fellowship of churches, that even if the leadership of the denomination, like those who are appointed as president and stuff of the larger overall structure, loose structure, network of churches or whatever you want to call it, like they could still speak out about it and say, hey, we've heard lots of rumblings about these things. Here's some practical steps. And we could create a rule that says, hey, if we hear of, X things, we are going to disfellowship you from the SBC. And, because we're going to be above board on this. And maybe they could do something. But at the end of the day, all those churches would just be like, okay, we'll just be independent churches. We'll be independent Baptists.
Yeah, it's really sad what's gone on with all of this, because I think like the church has kind of an air of, like we tend to, like the church tends to look at secular society and say we have superior morality,
right?
Because we believe in, no sex before marriage. And the world is saying we believe consent is the highest ethic. And it's like, I think we might have missed the boat here, because we're more concerned about covenant than consent. And I'm like, ideally, you've got to have both. And so it's interesting. Like, it's funny talking to Kootenai girl, who's like just totally sex positive and all about consent. But she said, like Christianity should also be about consent. Like it's our relationship with God is consensual. And I'm like, dang, that's a really interesting place to go with all of this, because it's like, I think when we talk about all these deconstructing Christians and how people are trying to attack them and all this stuff, I'm just kind of like looking at it. I'm like, and I think the fear is that if we're okay with Kevin Max, he's going to lead the masses. wherever he's going, right? And I think I understand that's the fear, but I'm like, when the prodigal left his father's home, the father didn't look at the older son and say, don't turn out like him, right?
Mm.
And you kind of get the sense that the father was like, okay, like, you're going to go sow your wild oats. Yeah, here's your inheritance. See ya, right? But it's like you have a sense that the father's like, I'm totally going to be ready to receive him when he comes back, if he comes back, right? And I think that when I look at all these people who are struggling with their faith, I feel like the father's still waiting for them, and is like, I'll be here for you, whatever you need, right? And I don't feel like the church is doing that.
Right.
And so I think that I hope that, this can humble us, and we can look at, do some internal work on the church and look at it and say, maybe the world has a better sexual ethic in a way because consent is so important. And, purity culture really kind of preached this whole, like, men can't control themselves, so women have to make sure that they don't cause men to stumble, and I think there's varying degrees at which that was taught, because I was never in a position where I was like, okay, well, she's wearing that, therefore my lust is okay, right? Like, I never believed that. But it feels like there are certain areas where that was almost taught.
I'm not sure it was taught as just given a wink and a nod.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah, boys will be boys. Like, but I mean, like, for my experience, I know, like, Promise Keeper stuff that I was involved with, like, yeah, I heard very little about women as far as, like, their need to play a certain role, and the onus was always on my need to own up to my calling in Christ, to control my own sexual lust, to make a covenant with my eyes not to lust upon a woman, and things of that nature. So
like Job, I remember learning that.
Right. And so, like, that's what was drilled into me. Yes, I heard, in my experience, like, I saw women be hard on other women for dressing a certain way in the church. When I was in the Pentecostal Church of God, my ex-fiance that I dated, she had long hair down past her mid-back, and she had never wore a pair of blue jeans until she was 18 years old. And then, and her mom always wore a skirt. Her mom never cut her hair her entire adult life. And no makeup, very minimal jewelry, if any. Even amongst ministers, they may not wear wedding rings because that could be considered immodest and flashy. So I think everybody's had different experiences, of course, but I know, at least from where I stand, and I think, living in the Bible Belt, I got a good exposure to a lot of it. I think I definitely heard more onus. Now, I did hear crap on women, but the way I understood it is I was always supposed to be the master of my domain, so to say.
Right. I think, I mean, I remember at some point, high school and junior high, like, boys and girls got separated for, like, Sunday school. I guess they thought we'd be more manageable that way. And we got very, like, heavily, like, you guys are responsible for how guys see you and what that brings up, and there was a dress code in church that, people got kicked out for, like, from Sunday school for not dressing appropriately. To sit in the hallway for 40 minutes before service, which never made a lot of sense to me. But and I feel it set us up for a lot of, like, judging of each other in seventh grade, of, like, her skirt's just a little too short. You're supposed to be able to bend your knee and feel it in the crease so that it's long enough. Like, I don't know, we were taught very much, but we were also half gothered, so it's take that with a grain of salt, but very much taught. And then that's brought with me into my adulthood of, like, can I wear this? Is this okay? Like, I don't think I wore like a V-neck until I was in my 20s or something, of just,
Mm.
is this okay? Is this too short? Is this tight? Is this a problem? Like, can I wear this to church? Can I wear this in front of your friends?
Yeah.
And I care less about it now, just more like, I'm comfortable. I'm fine. If I were to suddenly dress insane, my husband would probably be like, well, this is new. What's going on
Yeah.
here? This is different. What's up?
Yeah.
But there was a lot of pressure, and just that somebody else's husband was always a big deal, of
Yeah.
like, you're surrounded by like 15, 20 guys in youth group, maybe you'll marry one of them, but not all of them. So that's somebody else's husband. You got to dress the right way around somebody else's, like, you were
Your husband.
14. Like, that's unnecessary. Stop that. But
That's crazy.
yeah, there was a lot of pressure on, just how other people reacted to us. It was a thing. It was a thing.
Yeah. And I think, like a lot of control there. And I think, like, and there were very strict things about my upbringing too, kind of out of fear of, like what the world would do to us, right? And so then you raise the next generation and you're like, well, I want them to understand the world.
Mm.
But it's kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of making this up as I go along, right? And that's parenting. But I don't want to give them, like super hardcore structure and tell them what to think. And so raising kids, that think for themselves, and they're going to think for themselves.
Right.
Right.
And there's a certain amount of risk in that. But it's like I'm somebody too that's grown to, I don't know, I feel like an outsider in the church a lot of times.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking for myself too.
Right.
And so it's takes you to interesting places, and it helps me understand people like Kevin Max. I'm like, hey guys, leave him alone. He's figuring things out. Everybody relax.
Chill.
All right. So what's up with folks baptizing their babies?
It's always like a subtweet thing on Twitter going on. It's like I've never seen so much obsession with baptism.
Baptism.
Yeah, I've like it's like something I've seldom been exposed to up until like the last couple of years on Twitter. Like
I know there was like
churches
a
that do it.
guy. There was a
It's
guy that was like saying, I left my church because I'm now believe in pedo baptism.
I saw that.
And I'm
I
like,
saw
and
that
I
one.
think, like it stems from like there's a guy in the Bible that got his whole household
right.
baptized, right? And so it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not 100% against, baptizing babies, but I don't know. I think it's really awesome to give people the choice.
My church does it. We only had my youngest while we were attending, and just didn't end up doing it because it's just not something that either of our families really ever did. I was baptized when I was like 13 or 14, I guess, but a lot of them do it, and then they do confirmation later. We go to like a Lutheran Brethren church, and nobody was like, you had this baby, when are we going to baptize? But now they're starting to talk about it. And now, like, my oldest is 9, and she's been like, why didn't can I get baptized? She saw her
Yeah.
older cousins get baptized a little bit older. And I was like, well, yeah, sure, now like that you want to. But I went through their membership class, and like everything about it, there's a basis for it. I still just don't know that I agree with it entirely. Like, I can see both sides. Nobody just pulled it out of thin air. Both sides go, yes, you can because of this. No, you can't because of that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll sit in the middle, and she can just decide when she wants to. But
Yeah.
I find it fascinating.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm against it,
Yeah.
but I don't really understand why I'd have to do it.
I just
Like, I
don't.
think like
Yeah.
dedicating your child in front of the church, and if that's a form of dedicating your child in front of the church, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I
But
know
I
that they
also
think there was
like-
something saving in it, which makes me go,
Yeah.
well, okay, so if God forbid, like, baby passes beforehand, do we believe in like, what's happening there?
I think
Or
there's like an age of innocence stipulation.
Right. Which
I
again,
don't know.
that's pulled out of thin air, which is
I
like, when is
I
that?
know it's nuts.
And
I'm just like all
I love
these
the
like
pastor, and he was like, we would
technicalities.
never say that a baby who passed would be like in damnation. And I was like, well, then why does the baby need to be baptized? And he's like, well, I can't really, just whatever. So I
Or why do we
Well,
let
we
them
didn't go
live
forward, but
past like the age of innocence then, you know? Like it's kind
mm.
of like this kid kind of looks like they might reject their faith at some point. So
they're showing early signs of apostasy.
Oh
That's
no.
good. No, the thing is with the Corinthians, allegedly the Corinthians baptized their dead, and the Apostle Paul, didn't make too big of a stink about them doing that. So I figured if Paul didn't make too big of a stink about them baptizing for the dead, then maybe it's okay if somebody baptizes their baby. But they shouldn't be opposed to me saying, hey, if I'm going to grant you that, then maybe when you get older, you want to get baptized again just because, your parents did this thing to you and you would like to experience Jesus because you've made the choice to follow Jesus. But of course that upsets them because they're almost always in that camp. They're almost always, Calvinistic predestined. So the idea that you would make a choice to follow Jesus would be bothersome enough for you to, articulate something like that. So of course they baptize you as baby because, God forbid you ever make the choice to follow Jesus as an adult, and make the choice to get baptized as an adult. That would just wreck their theology, I think. Maybe.
religion's so silly.
It is sometimes. The games we
well,
play.
well, there's the title.
Right.
Well, it's like, yeah. And I mean, like, it's like I said, my God's pretty chill. So I'm like, I don't think he's going to be like, well, technically this was the kind of baptism you got, so it doesn't count. So eternal, away from me,
Right.
the weeping and gnashing of teeth you go. Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. Working from home. Well, it's funny because I'm gonna keep working from home because I decided to.
Rock on.
The girl, you work from other people's homes.
Often. Yep.
Yeah, so there's not really an office. So really it comes down to Jimmy. Are you gonna work from home forever?
As long as they let me.
Yeah. You think they may return you to the office eventually?
I hope not, because now that I'm at a new company, the office is in Cleveland, Ohio, and I live here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So
Oh, that's a hell of a commute, isn't it?
yeah, and my wife's already told me that we're never moving to Ohio. So if my company values my employment and me doing all the awesome things that I do for them on their behalf, they will continue to let me work from home. If that ever becomes an issue, well, I get a notification on LinkedIn about once a week of somebody else that wants to hire me to work remote.
Wow.
So
I think there's a lot of companies that will try to force the issue of
sure,
having people come back to the office so that
totally.
they can keep a closer eye on some of their employees.
Which is ridiculous. It's not like you see most of them anyway. It's like like most managers I know, it's not like they're sitting there looking at their employees' work all day. No, they're like answering emails, answering phone calls. They're too busy. Like half the time, like I've worked in the office, my managers, I didn't even see them on a daily basis, even though they sat like three or four rows down or 3 or 4 cubicles down. Like, so I don't know where this idea of seeing somebody, is like you can monitor people's activity through technology now, and if they're typing on their computer and exactly what they're typing. So if you need to know if they're working or not, just look at the logs and see what their production was for the day and what they did. It's not like you can't trace that stuff. So
I'd be intrigued to see like if that actually ends up being commonplace where we keep a lot of people working from home. Will that make a difference in global emissions? What's that going to do to office spaces, downtown in these cities? Because I know like our downtown was pretty vacant before COVID because there were a lot of issues with the oil and gas industry. And so it's like if people aren't returning to the office, what happens with all these office spaces? Are we going to have to figure out maybe build more residential in those areas where there used to be offices, right? So it'd be interesting to see like if this has a lasting effect. Well, I mean, clearly 9/11 had a lasting effect. And so I think this is the only thing we can kind of compare it to maybe
Right.
COVID-19 will have a lasting effect too on how we do work and how much we commute. What are you talking about, designer doggies?
Oh my goodness. So ever since our dogs have died over the last couple of years, and our one most recently just a couple months ago, my wife and I have been looking at getting a different dog. And, we're not in a rush to do it, but we've been trying to talk about the different type of dog we want. We want low maintenance dog that doesn't require more haircuts than I do. And, things like that. Something that doesn't shed a lot, something that we can pick up, something that is, friendly, good dog and that sort of stuff. So we've looked at a couple dogs, and we were like looking at a French bulldog. And like, oh, French bulldogs, they're so cute with the big ears and the little bodies and the little
I
hands.
love them so
like,
much.
They are. But you know how much they cost?
Two arms and two legs.
Yeah,
Yes.
they cost $5,000.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, maybe I can get a cheaper one. And people are like, no, you don't want a cheaper one, because if you do, they're probably usually poorly bred. They've been neglected for a reason. And if you find one under like this certain price, you can guarantee to get a dog that's going to cost you twice as much, because it's going to have so many medical issues and you're going to spend $10,000 just trying to take care of it and doing surgeries and stuff. And I was like, what the heck? And I found out the reason why this dog costs so much is because it's only been around about 100 years, and 80% of the dogs for French bulldogs that exist only because they've been artificially inseminated. Which got me to thinking, what were they doing 100 years ago? Because apparently these dogs can't really naturally breed. Like their physical posture, the way they've been designed and bred, requires artificial insemination in order to make them breed. Now, it happens occasionally, but I'm like that they breed naturally, but it's apparently very difficult the way their parts are all aligned and everything for that to really ever get figured out by the dogs.
More than I wanted to know about those dogs.
And I'm sitting there thinking 100 years ago, they didn't have artificial insemination methods that we have today. So what exactly were they doing? To breed these dogs. But I digress. So, but I mean, it's like, and then we started like, okay, we've ruled that out, because former big banker that I am, I'm not going to spend $5,000 on a dog. And especially like if I have a $5,000 dog running around in my backyard, chances are somebody else knows about that, and they're just going to reach over and say Fluffy, and then walk off with my gold brick that's named Fluffy. And so we started looking at other dogs, and like, it's like, holy crap, there are so many dogs that are bred that are expensive, and most of them these days end with the name Doodle. It's like become a thing. I know so many people with different type of dog named Doodle at the end, and they're all like $1,500, $2,000, and it's just like, man, that's still like, that's too rich for my blood. Like, I was like, our mutt that we had, he lasted 17 years. He outlasted the two other dogs, which were purebred German Shepherd and purebred Shih Tzu. And like, so he outlived all of them. So apparently there's something great about just a good old fashioned American mutt. But he also had issues. So
there's too many different kinds of dogs.
Yeah.
So let's eliminate some.
If we're going to eliminate them, can we at least like, put them on a smoker or something?
Well, what's the age of innocence for dogs?
For dogs. Forever.
They're always puppies. They're always puppies.
Always pups.
Kill kids, kill puppies. All right, let's move on. No. How receptive are you going to be to handshakes and hugs post-COVID? Are you guys are post-COVID?
Pretty much here.
Are you?
I mean, things are opening more and more. It's looking better.
I mean, things are still shut down for you, aren't they, John?
Yeah, we're getting there, but yeah, we're not quite opened up yet.
Yeah, like everything's pretty much open here.
I don't know, like, how common was hugs, like, outside
I was never a hugger.
Family? Like, I mean, some churches, maybe some people would hug, but it wasn't crazy common. I think handshakes, I think handshakes will probably just come back.
Yeah.
There'll be old school people that want a handshake, and I'm not going to refuse them.
Somebody offered to shake my hand recently. I did, but it was like probably the first time I've shook somebody's hand in a year and a half.
Did you spit on your hand first?
I
They
gave him
weren't
the.
making
I
a
gave him the.
pact.
I gave him the limp, like where you grab 3 fingers sort of thing.
Oh,
No.
gross.
He must have thought you were very manly.
Very manly as we got
Were
ready.
you making that voice from the beginning too?
Absolutely. Oh no, I right now I'm kind of happy with the fist bump.
Mm.
I'm still a little nervous, even though I know I'm vaccinated and most people that I know are vaccinated. And so but it's just weird. I was never big on shaking hands to begin with, or hugs. I'm just not a very touchy-feely person, except for the people that I need to be touchy-feely with.
Would you touch and feel me, Jimmy?
Okay.
Just gonna head
Since
out
you
now.
asked,
I'm so awkward in person. Finger guns have served me well, and they will continue to do so. There's 1 or 2 hugs, but most of the time it's just like, hey, it's nice to see you, and move along.
I was kind of hoping the shin bump thing that people were doing, like the hopscotch sort of thing, where they were just like putting their foot out
Oh,
and like kind of tapping it. Like I was hoping that was kind of going to become a thing.
I think I'm just
see
going to
that. I would
start
do that.
sloppy wet kissing everybody.
Oh gosh,
Start giving everybody.
that is unforeseen.
Do it at church. You will make the news if you do it at church this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been thinking about like when I was a teacher, one of the things my principal had told me all the time is have high expectations for people and they will meet them. And he had high expectations for me and I never met it. And I was thinking about like how like within teaching, you're taught that when you're taught to teach, you're taught that there's a zone of proximal development. And so there's kind of a certain level of learning a child can aspire to. And so you don't teach above their head, but you don't teach them stuff they already knew. You need to give them something that's within their reach. And I was thinking about how that applies spiritually. And even like if you look at like throughout the Bible, and I love like Rob Bell's take on this, where he's just like, Old Testament is like, please, can you stop killing your brother?
Please stop the killing.
And then when you get to the New Testament, there's Jesus that's saying, love your enemies. And you can see kind of a progression where humanity, their proximal level of development was got to learn to stop killing your brother. And then the zone of proximal development moved to where it was like people were apparently ready to say, love your enemies. Although I think a lot of us are still not ready for that, right? And so kind of seeing that trajectory in the Bible, it's interesting to me. I mean, there's a couple things, I guess. First is like, if that's the trajectory of the Bible, why are we using the Bible to try to move society backwards? You know, we're like, oh, whoa. I think you're letting women do too much in the church. We need to get back to what the Apostle Paul said. But if that's truly the trajectory, does it make sense to move society backwards, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is, I think in how we deal with people spiritually, we need to look at what their zone of proximal development is. And so when we're inviting people to the church, to be able to say, okay, but just so you know, these are the things we're going to require of you. This is the type of sexual ethic you're going to have. And all these things. And there's all these people who are like, yeah, I don't think I can fit in with that community. And so it's like, can we adapt so that we can meet people where they're at and find things that it's like, well, okay, well, where are you at right now? I can see that you're struggling with, depression. Let me help you with that and figure out how to help you with that, instead of saying, oh, by the way, I see all these sins in your life that I don't have. But anyways, what do you think about the whole trajectory thing, Jimmy? Is that crazy?
I think there's something to it. But at the same time, I also see instances in the Bible where Jesus just like blows everybody up because they can't handle it anyway. Like, hey, young rich ruler, go sell everything you have and give it to the poor and then come follow me. Well, that's too much for him. Or, Jesus telling the disciples that, hey, you need to be eunuchs. That was too much for them. But at the same time, I see Paul kind of, meeting, in Book of Philemon, he was with Onesimus. He was kind of like dealing with the runaway slave issue. And instead of just saying like, hey, you shouldn't have slaves because that's a sin. And so we're going to kick you out of the church. He was just kind of like, he gently persuaded him and saying, this slave that you used to own, dear brother, he's now become a brother in the faith. He's become very useful to me. Have you ever considered letting him go? I'll reimburse you for the loss that you're suffering, and it was a kind of a gentle diplomacy over something as egregious as slavery. So I think, it's kind of almost like what somebody needs to hear in that moment that will determine if it's going to be the gentle prodding nudge of, maybe you should let your slave go, dear brother. Maybe you should let him free. To versus sell everything you have and give it to the poor and then follow me. How you judge what that's going to be for every individual, I'm not sure. I guess it's ultimately going to be spiritually discerned in the moment.
Yep, that's true. I mean, it reminds me of, do you remember Tony Campolo, where he's like, last night, 30,000 people or 30,000 children died of starvation. Or he said, I'm going to tell you three things. Sorry. First thing, 30,000 children died of starvation. Number two, most of you don't give a about that. Number three, most of you are angry that I said the SH word than you are that there's 30,000 children that died last night.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that's a big truth bomb. And that probably hit most of the people in that congregation, if he was right, very hard.
Yeah,
and I don't know if hearts and minds were changed, but it's like one of my favorite quotes. Because I'm like, it's like, what are we really supposed to be appalled at? And so I think you're right. Sometimes it's time to drop a bomb, and sometimes it's time to give a little gentle nudging. Anything to add, the girl?
I don't know. I'm sorry. My brain is drawing a blank right now on this one. I think, I don't know. I like that. I just also, with actual teaching, we've been homeschooling now for like 2 years, and there's definitely been times that I'm like, well, I'm going to read this to you or show you this or whatever and they'll absorb what is just what they can, what is kind of age appropriate, what they can handle. And, sometimes I think that that's the way to go. But then also, you don't want to overwhelm either. The thing with the trajectory, and I hate the slippery slope nonsense, but the trajectory kind of goes like, all right, well, we can see from, just please don't kill your brother but also love your enemy. I don't know that we necessarily know where it goes after that.
No.
So like, I think that becomes a little bit, it could become dangerous of like, well, this is the trajectory that things were going, so let's continue that way.
I'm just thinking that it's like,
we can just make anything up.
Stop killing your brother, love your enemy, and now love Satan.
That's the next step.
Hail
There's nothing
Satan.
in between.
Hail Satan.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Hail Satan.
It dawned upon me as you were speaking. I was like, that's the new progressive way.
That's
buy your Satan shoes, dance.
To play devil's advocate. We don't know where this trajectory ends up.
Well, I mean, and it's interesting too that Jimmy brings up slavery, because I'm like, there are people that are still trying to argue that slavery is okay according to the Bible. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care. Because I mean, like, even Paul, like, I don't get the sense that Paul was hyper anti-slavery, but it was like slavery was a fact of life in that time. And so he worked with it as it is. And I think there's a number of things that Paul worked with as it was. And if we continue that whole trajectory kind of mindset, it's okay to be anti-slavery now. And there's no reason
Can't we all
to
just
say,
agree
well,
that now is the
hold
time?
on. Paul said if you're a
Whoa.
slave, you're
Man,
your
John,
master. So
I
we
don't
need all
know.
those slaves to go back to their masters, right?
I don't know if that's in some people's proximal development there, John. Not today. I'm pump the brakes. It may be the 21st century, but it's only been 200 years, John. It's only been 200
It's only
years.
been 200 years.
Not ready.
150 or something. 1865, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot to root that kind of stuff out in a country too, without getting political.
For sure.
I mean, we just discovered in Canada, I don't know if you heard about this, but we just discovered 215
I saw
bodies
that.
of children at a residential school.
Yeah, I heard something about that.
Kamloops, BC.
Mhm.
And it's like the whole strategy was that it was like a joint effort between the church and the government to basically get the Indian out of the child.
Mm.
And so they
Mhm.
were trying to get them to not speak their native tongue. And in some cases, there was actually skin bleaching that went on.
Wow.
It's so messed up, and it's like such a messed up part of our history. And it's like you look at it and you say, well, yeah, that's awful. We did that back then. Good thing we got it all fixed now, right? And we don't.
Right.
Like we have indigenous reserves where people don't have clean water. And it was really interesting because I saw a TikTok of one of our politicians, and it's like the guy who's like, he's not obviously not the prime minister, he's not the opposition leader, he's like third in line, right? Like it's the third party guy, right? Who was like just basically like somebody was saying to him, like, if you were prime minister, you're saying you would solve this water issue. And he's like, what's your plan? Like, you're just gonna sign a blank check and solve this water issue? And the guy looks at the reporter and says, if Toronto didn't have clean water, would you be asking this question? If Vancouver didn't have clean water, would you be asking this question? I was like,
Nice.
whoa. But it's like, he's right. Like, it's like, it doesn't matter what the cost is. If we've got people that don't have clean water, why aren't we fixing it? Right. So there's a lot. There's a real reckoning that needs to happen between Canada and its Indigenous people. And so that's our thing right now. So come Canada Day. There's a story about a little girl who got sent to a residential school. So basically, these children got taken away from their parents. They were sent to this school, and the whole idea was to kill their culture, right? And I mean, 215 kids were killed, and it's like, under what circumstances? A lot of abuse, obviously, but it's like that's genocide. Like at that point, is genocide. And so, but this little girl, she was kind of excited about her first day of school. And she put on an orange shirt and she was all excited about it. And then when she showed up, she found out what it really was. And so in Canada, we have one day every year. I'm not sure what the date is, but there's a day every year that we call Orange Shirt Day, where we remember these residential school victims. And so come Canada Day, I'm going to wear an orange shirt because I want to honor those children, right? And so, and I mean, there's so much work to do, and it's hard to know what to do because it's like, well, I guess I really have to consider how I vote because I want somebody who's going to deal with this seriously, and let's solve this issue once and for all, because there's still big issues in how we are treating people that are our own citizens and who were here before us. And it's like, we can't even say, no, you lost the war. And so, it's no, we went out of our way to mistreat these people. And so anyways.
No, I saw that on the news, and it coincided. I was just reading a book on reproductive justice, and it specifically had talked about, Indigenous people brought into, schools and everything like that, and just like forced sterilization of huge just populations of people just to keep those numbers down. It was a crushing read, but no, that was devastating. I saw that.
And was that tied into Christianity too?
Not particularly. It was a lot of colonization. It came from the lens of race and trying to keep things white, and it touched on everything from the right to have children, which was fascinating in the ways that people had been forced sterilization in the past, whether for whatever reason that they were deemed, unfit to be able to have children in the future,
Right.
to the right not to have children and then to
Right.
parent safely. And it was fascinating. And there was a lot that really challenged how I felt and what I thought, but it was a good read.
Yeah, and that eugenics was really big too, right? Where they were
Mm-hmm.
doing that to people who were had Down syndrome
Yeah,
or
exactly.
other disabilities. So, but it's like let's lead the way as the church on these issues.
Hooray!
And because I mean, like in the past, we haven't shown leadership. We've been so, I guess, manipulated by culture. But I almost think sometimes the church has been leading culture down a bad path too. And so it's, this love of enemies is not evident. And I think maybe that's the place to start, because like we're living in polarized times where we have people divided into like a two-party system. And it's like, well, I'm this, therefore you guys are racist and we hate you. And then it's like, well, I'm this and you guys are baby killers, therefore I hate you. And it's like there's no conversation between the two. So wouldn't it be amazing if the church was the one place where there is no two-party system, where we're united by Christ? Just a thought.
It's me. I'm the politically homeless one over here. That's my jam.
It's got to be really hard to be politically homeless.
It is. It is. Like people accuse me of being a coward. People accuse me of all sorts of things. And, it's kind of like, it's like, oh, you're just a Trump supporter. Oh, you're just a Biden supporter. Like, no, I didn't like either of the guys. Like, and I'll tell you exactly why. Well, you're not voting for my guy as a vote for the other guy. Like, no, it's just me not voting for your guy or the other guy. I voted for me. Well, that's not a real vote. The United States federal government took it. Somewhere my name is written down on a ballot. But
wait, do you really vote for yourself?
This year I did, yes.
That's so funny.
I really had problems with both candidates, and I just like, and I'm happy to be politically homeless and to forever be such. I mean, I'll probably swing back to the other direction for the next election, but maybe not. Maybe I'll keep things spicy.
Honestly, I think my vote, because every time the election comes up, I'll be just like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna sit this one out. Right. And I remember somebody saying to me, what's his name? Something Bradley. He's an author anyways. He's written for Relevant magazine. But he said to me, he's like, well, that's a real sign of your privilege. And I'm like, what? And he's like, well, you think if you don't vote, it's not going to make a difference to you. Maybe you should consider voting on behalf of someone for whom it would make a difference. So I'm thinking next time I vote, I'm going to vote on behalf of Canada's Indigenous people.
I like that.
I mean, but that presumes what that you presume to hold a position that must be monolithic to those people. I would imagine those people are, even in their position, whatever it is pretty diverse. Some of them
certainly. But if I listen to that community and understand who they believe, as a majority, who they believe is going to be best for them.
Well, I mean, people say that about minorities in America, and yet this past year, more minorities in America voted for the orange guy than ever in the history of voting. So, Like, I think it's very presumptive for anybody to guilt trip somebody else into broad brushing with a monolithic narrative that voting one way must be a vote for that other, for those people, because, there's a number of people that would radically disagree with that amongst those people that they claim to be. Like, to me, that's just not to get political, but that's white liberal guilt tripping, where white liberals presume to speak for blacks and more than blacks even will on certain issues.
I'm not going to shame people into voting.
Right.
And I'm not going to be shamed into voting. I vote the way I vote.
Absolutely.
And I let people vote the way they vote. So
sure.
It's a non-issue for me.
But we don't get political.
It's funny. One of my friends on Twitter, Doug Birsch.
I love Doug.
Fairly spiritual.
Yes.
He made this joke about, like, he basically was joking about, like, is there somebody who teaches humility? Is there classes that you could teach on humility? And it was funny because it reminded me of, like, the episode of the Wax Museum that I just released on the book, The Road to Character, that I read, I guess, 5 years ago now. And it just really got me down a rabbit hole of just trying to understand what humility is. And it was through the stories of, like, people like Dorothy Day, President Eisenhower, President Franklin Roosevelt. And there's just a series of all these different people that, he goes through the lives of them. And it was really interesting because there's like a study, and I quoted this on the podcast with notes in front of me because I've quoted this study so many times, but it was kind of like in the 1950s, they did a study and they asked high school students, are you an important person? And 12% of them said yes. Repeated that study in 2005, and it wasn't 12% that said yes. It was more like 80% said yes. And it's like, so what has happened as a shift in our society? And if you go back to the 50s, I mean, obviously the 50s had a lot of problematic things going on.
Right.
But within that culture, this is what we tend to call the greatest generation. And they were a generation that was taught not to talk about themselves. And, like, there's stories of, like, George W. Bush or George H. Bush. And when he would write a speech, he'd always think about how his mother would say, don't ever talk about yourself. And he would go through and mark out, like, cross out anything that said I in it, right? Because he's not allowed to talk about himself. But if he forgot to do that, his mother would call him and say, George, you were talking about yourself again. And so it's just neat little stories like that. And, like, learning that it's like, more than anything, when I am creating something, when I'm working as an artist, I want to get out of the way of my work, right? It's like, I want my work to speak for itself. And I think that is a way of humility. And it's the same thing with parenting. It's like, I want my child to be the best version of themselves they can be. It's not about them looking good so I can look like a good parent. It's like, I'm wanting them to be the best them they could be. So again, I want to get out of the way for that process.
Right.
And so yeah. So, I mean, like, and it's been tricky because over the last 5 years, it's like just growing in that understanding. And so I replied to Doug and I said, this is a really good book. It tells stories of all these people. And then Doug's like, I think probably the best way to teach humility is to tell people stories about wise people, right? Because, like, for me to say, this is how you be humble, it's like, what?
I was really hoping that was going to be the path to teaching humility, because that's what I was going to make my podcast tomorrow about how I can teach you humility.
3 easy steps to humility.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny too, because you realize that, like, false humility really rears its head in so many ways. And a lot of times it's just you saying, like, I don't want people to think I appear prideful. And so you've got all these instances where, like, somebody says, wow, Bethany, your singing was so good Sunday. And then you're like,
Yeah,
oh crap, what do I say?
Do you read my journal? Because that's quite seriously, like, I usually just like, oh, thank you, it's a lovely song. Like I try to,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, they wrote a lovely song, just, or, it's one of my favorites, or that's it.
Yeah.
We've gone to our church for like 8 years.
Uh-huh.
And I think it took me 5 or 6 before I was finally like, I sing. Who do I talk to about this? Because just saying like this is a thing that I can do and would like to serve in
Mhm.
felt so prideful. And that
Hmm.
there was a lot of indoctrination in like where I
Yeah.
grew up. Like pride was the worst thing, but everybody
Yeah.
was really prideful. But it was like the biggest sin in the world. And
Yeah.
I felt weird, and it took a lot. It took to be honest, it took my mom's passing, because she sang
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
years and years. Thank you. She sang for years and years, and she didn't in the later years of her life, and I know that she missed it.
Yeah.
And I, I've just felt this push of like, she's not here to even do that, and I feel
Yeah.
like I need to keep that going somehow. Like
Yeah.
that just gave me that little push of like, okay, I have to do something with
Yeah.
this. And it, yes, taking compliments is terrible. Or anytime there's like a, does anybody want to handle this song or that harmony? I can't do harmonies, but does anybody want to do this? Can
Yeah.
you do the upper notes? And I'm like, I can, just
Yeah.
it took a lot. And now
Yeah.
I'm just more comfortable in like, yeah, I got this. It's fine. Just
Yeah.
confidence rather than pride. It's still a
Yeah.
balancing act for me.
I think
So yes,
confidence
you
is
read my
the key
mail.
word there, because I think confidence is definitely the key word there, because I think,
Mm.
we think of humility and it's always becomes a self-deprecating thing that people engage in when it comes to like,
Which it's
basing
not.
themselves. And it's
False
not
humility.
like,
Yeah.
that's false
Mhm.
humility. And it's like, I think a true, I like the phrase humble confidence,
Mhm.
that you have this quiet, humble confidence about whatever it is that you're about. And you don't need to, somebody says something bad about you or whatever, you don't need to defend yourself.
Right.
Yes.
But it's like at work, I know I've had some people at prior employer badmouth me. I never defended myself because
Yeah.
my work spoke for itself.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
good stuff.
like, if I wanted to sit there and point to my quality or my production numbers, I could have.
Yeah.
And somebody like thinking I was cutting corners and be like, if I was cutting corners, I'd have been caught by now. But so like, or when it came to knowing somebody was wrong about something, I didn't have to speak up because just to show that I knew that they were wrong.
Yeah.
I just quietly was just like, if somebody asks me, I'll let them know. And this is
Yeah.
why this is right, but I didn't ever feel the need to be in a defensive posture or an attack posture about whatever it is I'm about, because I just like, I know what I'm made of,
Mhm.
and I know who I'm about and what I'm about. And I've been through enough stuff in my life that, or personal or professional, that when it comes to certain points, it's like I can just let things be,
Yeah.
because I have that sort of, humble confidence about
Right.
a situation. It's like a master carpenter or something, like, like, or I could sit there and think about my father or my father-in-law, who are fantastic with tools and trade type, work with your hands type stuff. They know how to build and destroy everything and rebuild it all over again. And I had lots of teachable moments, and I still have lots of teachable moments. When my father-in-law comes and helps with something, and he's just very quiet and calm about it. And he's just like, "Oh, try using this," and he'll sit there and watch me struggle and sweat and pass out and bang something half to death. And he's like, "No, wait a second, let me go back," and he'll come back with a different tool that he really uses. He just wanted to see me sweat. But it's like, but he doesn't have to worry about me saying like, "Well, Michael," or to my dad, like, "Hey, Dad," like, because they know I'm an amateur at the end of the day. And they're the ones with all the
Exactly.
skill, and they're confident in their skill, and their work speaks to itself.
And you can learn from them by being
Absolutely.
humble, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and I think like the thing to remember too, Bethany, when somebody compliments you, they want you to light up, right? They want
Right.
you to be happy that you complimented them.
Right.
So what I taught myself is to just say, thank you.
I know.
And if you could just say thank you, it's such
Yeah.
a beautiful thing, because it's like I remember when I was a teenager, and I was at the mall, and I needed 35 cents to make a phone call. I've probably told the story before, but I needed 35 cents to make a phone call, and I'm like, does anybody have any coins? I need to make a phone call. And there was some homeless guy that gathers carts, and he walks up to me, he's like, yeah, here. And I'm like, oh, no, I can't accept that from you. And he looks at me, he's like, no, please take it. It feels good to help someone else for once.
Oh.
And so I think about that a lot of times when somebody's trying to be kind to me. It's like, oh, I cannot rob them of this. And I think the most humble thing sometimes is to just be like, thank you.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's a double twist. My love language is words of affirmation. So I'm initially like, yay, but also, oh no, I must be like so humbled. But
yeah, I like saying thank you for the kind words, which may be
that's a good one.
Humble sometimes too. I don't know. Because it's like, yeah, you're being very kind. This actually sucked, but
but you know, to take this story, it's interesting because I did change jobs recently, and I was on an interview, and the person I was interviewing with that ultimately offered me the job that I got, they were asking me to tell about my experience, tell about how good I was, and I got to the point in the interview, I was like, well, not to brag, but I'm going to do it anyway because this is an interview. So I'm going to toot my own horn to you. And then the lady that I was interviewing with, my manager, she just laughed hysterically. She's like, "Oh, please do tell about yourself." And I was like, "I will." But I think that was but I think that was a good moment because I was able to take my professional accomplishments and wave it, not in a braggart sort of way, but just this is who I am.
Yeah.
And this is why I think you should pick me. And it worked out well. But if I just downplayed my accomplishments and, not said much about myself, that would have been arrogant of me, to dismiss my experiences. And I should be proud and confident in who God has made me to be. I shouldn't ever be ashamed of it. And I think too often we are taught to almost be ashamed of who God has made us to be, in his image and likeness. And God is great and glorious. And well, so am I.
I think part of it too is being able to give space for others, because it's like truly confident people give confidence to those around them.
Yes.
And so and that requires giving airspace to other people. And I'm trying to work on that, because it's like, I need to be able to let them have a time to shine too. But I just get so excited about all the stuff I want to share. And it's not like because I feel like I'm just so brilliant and I'm the one should be saying this. I just get really excited about all the ideas I have because I'm like, this is a really cool thing I read in Road to Character and it's so cool, right? But so I was listening to this podcast, and this guy said something that really rocked me, really stuck in my mind. And he was talking about when you get really good at lying, you learn to ignore cues that your body's giving you. So it's like when you lie to someone, you're thinking, oh crap, my face is turning red. And so you train your body so that your face does not turn red. And so if you became a really good liar, you become more and more disconnected from your body. And I was like, holy crap, this explains religious trauma, because you're living a lie.
Oh, more. Tell me more.
And you're completely disconnected from your body. And so when people talk about, I think it's Jamie Finch who talks about embodiment, she's going to be coming out with a book. And I'm like, I'm really intrigued to read that now, because these guys were not even talking about religious trauma. But I kind of made that link in my brain when I was thinking about it. I'm like, holy crap. If you were completely living a lie for 20 years, how disconnected from your body would you be? Because you're continuously convincing yourself, nope, my feelings don't matter.
Wow.
My feelings don't matter. Nope, I got to do what the leader says, right? And so anyways, I'm intrigued by that notion. And I want
to text somebody right now about that.
I want to get more connected with my body, and I think that's through mindfulness. I did a TikTok on this, and I talked about like what I think mindfulness is, and it's not necessarily just like, meditation, and it's like, which I've done a little bit of meditation and it's pretty cool. It's almost like being on morphine. It's pretty awesome, which I've done in the hospital. When I had my appendectomy, and morphine's awesome and I love it.
Tell us more.
But yeah. But another thing that I've been doing is just going to my backyard, and like I'm normally like stimulation all the time. I'm either listening to music, podcasts, or I'm watching Netflix or whatever. I'm always like full on stimulation. But I'll go to my backyard, no music, no podcast, and I'm just gonna go around with my little trowel and dig dandelions out of my backyard.
That's crazy.
And that's my moment of mindfulness. It's crazy.
Just be in there. All right.
Because I'm never in the moment. Like I'm always just like, oh, I'm doing a boring work task. Cool. I'm gonna get caught up on the blah 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 podcast, right? Like and so, but I think that there is something to being in the moment and how you can actually start paying attention to what your body's doing, and you can be more honest with your body and let your body tell you when you need to rest, when you need to eat. Right? There's just all those things because we get out of the rhythm of our bodies by living lies. And I think even being out and about, at work to a certain level, you're trying to carry yourself in a certain way in front of a client. And it's like you're lying to your body there too. So it's like, so finding that way to reconnect with your body, I think would be so healthy for us mentally.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, it's not a fully formed thought, but I'm
no,
just
but it's,
I don't know what to do with it. But
all the thoughts are going out. I like that.
Good. Okay, here's another one. Okay, so as an Enneagram 4, we're both very emotionally based, right? And so I was thinking about like, why do I love depressing music so much? Why do I love sad, depressing movies so much? And I think I must have heard somebody talking about why people cut themselves. And it's like this idea that I can control my pain. So instead of feeling all these emotions inside, now the pain is right in my arm, right here. I have control of the pain. And so I was thinking that might be it. So I'm listening to this sad music because now all of my pain has gone there and I have control of it. I'm not dealing with these emotions I can't control. I've decided to be sad, sucker.
Okay. I get that.
It's like a breakup music. Like people go through a breakup and they put on the most sad, depressing love songs of all time.
Yeah.
And it helps them get it out.
But I guess I have a sense of like, like Bethany was saying, where she was like reading that whole thing about like reproductive justice, right?
Right.
And you're reading that because it's like you're gonna get sad about it, but you're getting sad about it for a purpose. Right. Like you feel like now I can share this with people and I can somehow help fix this problem. But first I need to feel really sad about it.
Right.
But it's like that empathy kind of becomes a superpower because it's like now I've got the inspiration to do something about it. And I can share that sadness with other people and we can all be sad. And then we can figure out how we're going to solve this problem because now I'm living in this sadness, right? And I mean, like, it's just, there's so much of that there. And my heart will go to all these different places where I'm just like, okay, I need to have a depth of sadness. And I have a depth of sadness right now for our Indigenous people. And I'm like, I want to understand this more. I found a podcast that's all about Indigenous history and decolonizing our language because there's like words like residence or reserves, right? And it's like, what does that even mean? Like from
Right.
a white person point of view, it's like, oh yeah, this is all the land that we reserved for these people. But it's like these people used to like roam all of the land.
Right.
And then we set up borders and said, yeah, you can't go here anymore, right? And it's like, that sucks, right? And even like, discovered, white people said, we discovered this land. It's like, no, you made contact with the indigenous people. Let's use the word contact, not discovered, right? And so there's just a lot there, and it's just kind of reshaping, the way you see things, because it's like, I want to see it through their eyes. Like, I love seeing the world through different people's eyes, and then trying to understand, okay, so what can I do? And it's funny that, like people will label that as like white guilt. And it's like, no, I don't feel bad that I was born with this skin color. It's like, I look at this and say, okay, so I know that there's things I haven't experienced that these people have. And so what do I do with that? Right. And it's like, what are things that I have that they don't, that I could help them get? Right. Like there's just all of that. Right. And so, yeah. And I mean, there's different theories about how to get there, and without getting political, I mean, like some people think, it's just like, let's do equality of opportunity. And then there's like, well, let's do equality of outcome. Right. And so, yeah, there's a lot there. But it's like, that's where my brain's at, right? It's like, I want to use sadness for a purpose.
With the 4 and the sadness, I hadn't thought of it with like, the funnel of just, no, I have all these feelings. And if I can push them all into that, then it's sad about that and it gets it out. But I was like, oh no, it's like sensory processing disorder, where like, oh, I'm not getting enough of that sad feeling. Like I have that space that needs to be filled. If I listen to this sad song, I can fill up that like little emotional jar and feel better. My daughter had some sensory processing stuff, and every now and then we have to like, oh, you're seeking. We got to hug you and like shake you just a little bit, so that you got that feeling. Just a little. She wasn't a baby, but she was
had
like,
a visual.
She was 3 or 4. It was fine. But yeah, just a big hug, just to like now, and she would then calm down because she got whatever it was that she needed. And every now and then I'm like, oh, I wonder if a 4 would do that as well, of like, man, I've got this itch, and it's like just to get really deep into that feeling. But if I put on this song, I can get there and I'll feel better. Maybe it's both.
Well, and part of it too is like, I realize if I'm not empathetic toward other people, I become so self-involved, and I'll get involved in self-pity. But that kind of made me think too, because I'm like, I remember getting annoyed with whiny people, right? I did a TikTok on this today. And I was just like, you see a whiny person that's like, oh, I just got food from Boston Pizza and they didn't give me a fork. Why? Why does this have to happen to me? Right? And there's just like people that whine over little things. And I sit there and think, that's so immature. I'm an adult. I'm just going to think that in my head and never tell anyone that. And then all that stuff's just going to compile to where I'm super frustrated, but I still can't talk to anyone because everything that's frustrating me is silly and I'm too much of an adult to talk about it. Yeah. And I'm like, who's the unhealthy one? And I think the people that complain about every little thing are unhealthy too. But there's a sweet spot with it. Because you cannot just like not talk about your frustration ever.
I'm good. I'm okay.
That's what spouses and best friends are for. That's what they're for. That's the text of like, this stinks, but not TikTok. Maybe TikTok. I don't know what it's for.
Well, I did something a couple weeks ago where we ordered something from DoorDash, and it ended up being like 40 minutes later than what we had ordered. And I complained about it online. And, I had some people instant message me just like, some of us can't even afford to order something on DoorDash. And here you are complaining about your food being 40 minutes late. And I'm just like, yeah, I guess that's a little whiny of me. But I think I have a realistic expectation that if they promise that my food is going to be here at a certain time, that it actually show up like they promised, and that it not be cold, and then I'm not having to reheat my food. and all that stuff. Or we were at the beach recently and decided to order breakfast from Panera and ordered some bagels. They said, these are the bagels we have. I selected them. And then they called me up 40 minutes later and said, yeah, we don't have those bagels. What would you like to do? I'm just like, man, I really wanted to complain about that. But after having complained a couple of weeks ago, I decided, no, I'm not going to do it again. I deleted my post on social media about it. But
I
part of me's
missed
like,
it, man.
yeah. Part of me is like, yeah, maybe it is a little whiny of me. But at the same time, I feel like they set the expectation that they promised to fulfill my order at a certain time. And I understand things happen in the world, but it seems like the problem was with their process and not communicating that things had changed midway through, like because they decided to pick up an order and go somewhere else in town before they went and dropped off my food. I didn't know that was going to happen when I originally ordered my food. You know,
See, and I typically wouldn't complain at all about that. I'd be like, okay, just heat up my food. But it's like a
Right.
series of frustrations, though, right? Where you don't talk about them. But I mean, I think there's some things you can laugh off too. Like it was so funny. I was at this work site and I had to do like a bunch of radiation testing. You know how that goes, radiation testing. And then these guys were going to do some tasks, right? Where they were going to like open up the pipe and do some sampling of some of the oil or do a filter change or whatever. And I'm like, hey, so when I'm done all the radiation testing, can you guys do some tasks for me? And I'll just put samplers on while you do it. And he's like, yeah, we'll do anything. Yeah, whatever you want. Cause I listed off what I think we could get or whatever, right? So then I called like the office person. I'm like, hey, these guys said they would do whatever I want. Is there something in particular they want? And like, yeah, whoa, I really like a filter change. Like those are really nasty. I'm like, okay, cool. So I go back, talk to the guy and I'm like, okay, so you said that I could do, you guys could do any task I want. So we were asking about, I want to know about filter changes. And he's like, oh, we can't do anything but sampling.
Oh.
And I'm like, what? Like it was the same guy. Like it was the same guy I talked to. And I was like, it was just the funniest thing. And I was like, that's hilarious.
Words have meaning.
And I mean, it didn't wreck my day. It just was funny. I was like, I don't know what happened there, but something.
Cold fish doesn't reheat very well though, John. Cold fish does not reheat.
No.
Yeah. Did you complain to the company? Like, did you talk to them about it?
DoorDash doesn't really make a way of complaining to them about it. It just goes in. I mean, you can.
Are they kind of like Uber, where it's just like everybody's their own independent person?
Yeah, it is. And you can leave somebody a bad review. I'm like, I'm not going to leave somebody a bad review. You know, because they only took the second order because DoorDash said, hey, there's a second order in the area. You know, so
there really wasn't anywhere to complain but social media. And
pretty
yet
much.
those people
I could have
emailed
them and they would have gone into a black hole because they care this much, you know. And I'm like, I'm not gonna like. I understand these people work hard, and I always try to tip extremely well when I do DoorDash. Like, you know, sometimes it ends up being half my order, just because I know what it's like to have to do jobs like that. And you know, I'm in a position financially where I'm blessed to be able to, you know, shower people with a good tip, and not think twice about it. But, you know, so it's like, but I'm not going to ding this person. This person's just trying to make a living. I'm not going to fault them for taking a second order. Part of me is like, it'd be nice if DoorDash had a feature where they're like, you know, be an exclusive premier, no stops in between delivery sort of feature, to where if you pay $5 extra a month, we guarantee that your driver won't stop at somebody else's on the way to your order. You know,
DoorDash premium.
Right, like some sort of premium surge pricing type thing. I'd pay
rich
for
people like Jimmy.
Right, for my bags over here. But no, it's like, you know, because sometimes like stuff like that, it's like if it's like when I broke my leg a couple of years ago and my wife and I were trying to figure out how to celebrate our anniversary because I couldn't go anywhere, we ordered some food from a really nice restaurant. And we thought, oh, we'll get it delivered. And, you know, all of a sudden our $100 meal becomes craptastic because it got, you know, they had an extra delivery along the way. It was 40 minutes late again. and it was on the opposite side of town. And it's like, man, insult to injury. Here I am on a broken leg, not able to move. I need somebody to help care for me. So my wife couldn't just, go get the food. And so we ordered on DoorDash and just had, it was already bad enough that I was gimpy trying to celebrate our anniversary, but to have cold food from a nice restaurant and we're trying to figure out how to reheat, it was tough. I get it. It's we live in a sinful, broken world. And I get
it's like
it.
my yeah,
sufferings of
like
Job over here, right?
My food is past the age of innocence right now.
Right.
So
well, but it could be food poisoning. Realistically, if you had food that sat at a certain temperature for a certain period of time, you could get food poisoning from it.
Yeah, that's true.
For sure.
So
okay, so one quick little anecdote before we end here. Have you guys ever watched the show Nathan For You?
Never heard of it.
No.
Nathan Fielder is a Canadian comedian, and he does this show called Nathan For You, where he helps businesses that are struggling. Some of them aren't really struggling, but he just basically, it's always like a half-baked scheme. So there's this pizza place, and he says, I want to help you guys sell more pizzas. So he has this idea where he tells the pizza company to guarantee 8-minute delivery to anywhere. And if they are later than 8 minutes, they get a free pizza. But the free pizza is like it's like 4 inches wide, 3 inches wide. And so it's just so funny because like every time it shows like the pizza guy going to deliver and the guy's like, hey, that was more than 8 minutes. And he's like, well, here's your free pizza. And the guy at the door is like ready to punch the pizza guy. It's so funny. Anyways. All right.
I would watch that. That's good.
It's so great. It's so great. There's one where there's a yogurt company and he like one of those frozen yogurt places, and his idea is for them to come out with a controversial new flavor, poop flavored yogurt. And people are like lined up around the block to try this new flavor. Yeah. And it's so funny because he calls up like this flavor company. He's like, you guys say you can do any flavor I want? And they're like, yes, we do. We guarantee we can do any flavor you want. And he's like, okay, this is what I want.
Oh, no.
And then he has a focus group. And the focus group is like, they're all trying this yogurt. They don't know what it is, right? Then he's like, okay, can you tell us what it is? And one person's like, well, I could taste licorice or, or whatever, right? And then there's this one lady that's like, I think it's what poop tastes like. But then he's like, have you tasted poop before? It's really important. It's really important that you tell us whether you have or not. Like, can you be honest? Like, really important for the research that we know whether you have or not. Anyways, great show.
Woo.
It's very inappropriate and very fun. Anyways, thanks for hanging out on a Friday night. This will be out on a Saturday.
Cool.
Thank you for listening. If there are people listening.
My dad will listen.
Bye, everybody. I'm a real boy. UnisTable.com.
Catch you on the flippity floppity.
Air smudge.